Hey everyone, welcome to the Scalability demo, which is what it has always been. No reason for that comment. Andreas, you have the first item on the agenda.
All right, thank you. So I wanted to talk about the capacity planning rotation. I'm currently on that rotation, and we've had like 50 issues open. And my intention for this week and for next week also likely is not to drill in too much into those issues, but rather find out what we can do to reduce the number of issues so that we don't get them open in the first place. And the idea is basically to see what we can tune with the forecasting models that we have, so that Temland actually decides that not to create those issues in the first place. And I just wanted to show how we can do that. We got a little bit more flexibility recently in terms of what we can do with those models and how we can tune them. And then there's also a bit of new tooling that we can use to try that, and that's what I wanted to show quickly. Let me share my screen. Let's see, hopefully that works. Can you all see my screen? Good, all right. So this is one of those issues that we have. It's for GitLab, was open 2 weeks ago, and if we look at this, this is the forecast, right? So, and we have soft SLO and hard SLO, those are those red lines. And then we can see that there is a violation date for the soft SLO, right? So this is somewhere soon, or we are actually already beyond that. And what we can also see is a couple of outliers that we already marked. So this is those gray ones, right? And then if we look at sort of what the forecast looks like, or this is the blue line, the predicted one, but this is the actual model that we have. And if we look close enough, then we realize that it doesn't fit very well. Like it's trying to sort of hit those points, but it doesn't do so very well. And then in the end, it sort of shoots quite a bit higher than we would probably expect looking at those points. So the model isn't too great, I think. And this is probably when we see this issue, we go, well, let's push this to next week and see what happens then. But most likely it's not going to improve very quickly, and then we just keep adding those issues and everyone looks at these. And I think instead what we can try is take the next step and sort of try to improve those models. And this one is actually, I think, quite easy to fix. We can see that there's another bunch of outliers here. And then if we look at the rest, there's also a couple of these. This is basically noise in the data, and this is what causes this uncertainty. And if we can improve that, sort of we don't violate those thresholds, and then things don't get created in the first place. So what we've added is a way in Temland to generate forecasts individually. So what we can do today is just generate the forecast for one single component that we just looked at. And this is command line tool. Basically, you can do forecasting for just this component. And if we run this, we basically get the same results. I ran them before, so we already have that. So there's a couple of files. This is basically the result of the forecasting, right? This is a couple of plots, and then also information about those violations. So there's a YAML file that contains those, but this is not important now. So we have this plot. It's what we just saw on the issue. And those are those violations that we predict. And we wanted to add those outliers, right? We can do one more thing. We can look at the debug forecast. So this is just a wider plot, basically, with potentially a bit more information. We can also see the trend line here. This is maybe a bit hard to see, but this is the red line here, right? And then we can also see change points. This is these vertical lines. And basically
this is so cool.
Yeah, it's really nice to work with. And what's causing that uncertainty in the end is the noise in the data. And then number of change points in the history. So this is those vertical lines and their magnitude, because sort of the assumption is that the more change points we have in the history and the higher their magnitude, then in the future the same things are going to happen, and then we're more uncertain about how it's going to pan out. And so let's see what happens if we try to remove those outliers in the same way as the other ones here. I've just prepared this. This is into the manifest, and then we can. We've had that before actually, but it was in Timeline itself. Let's see. So there is. This is a lot of JSON data, so there we go. So this is Gitly, and then we can do, for this component, we can add outliers, and this is what I just added, right? So this is May until beginning of June. Let's see what happens. We run that again. Just takes a couple of seconds. And then we should see an updated graph. Right. So this is what we added. And notice the uncertainty is already better. But we're still seeing that violation over here. And this is because the uncertainty crosses that soft assembly, right? So we've added those outliers, but we still have this noise going on here. And this is sort of, every point is an hour, so we can't really exclude those manually. We can do just full days at the moment. So the alternative that we can do is trying to remove that noise automatically. So there is, we've implemented Z-score outlier detection, which basically says remove everything that is 3 standard deviations higher or away from the mean of the data in a rolling fashion. And if we do that, and this is not ready yet, but it's my local branch. If we do that, we're going to see that those outliers are also going to be removed, and the trend line here is going to fit much better in the end. And this is what happens, right? Now outliers are red. It's the same thing as before, it's just different color. You can see there's a couple of these outliers removed here. This is what we specified manually. And then the trend fits the data much better, right? So in the end, we don't have this violation. We don't get an issue created unless, you know, the trend changes in the future, and we don't have to look at it again. So
that is awesome.
And so I've gone through most of the issues this week already, and I think at least 1/3 of those 50 are maybe a good candidate to do exactly these things. So we can just reduce the number of issues that we have to look at.
So I have one question about the anomaly detection using Z-scores. What happens if there is genuinely a 3 sigma anomaly in the data?
So if that is not an actual outlier in that sense.
I mean, obviously
if the data goes like that, like the weekly pattern, for example.
Yeah, if there is actually like a 3 sigma or 4 sigma, it reminds me of the current
10%
of Antarctic ice, which is 6 sigma off but like, so do we have a way of kind of dealing with like, not like these are points, right? Like this is points, but like if it's like kind of like constant, right? So imagine if instead of it just being random points, it was like it jumped up to like, you know, whatever 50% and stayed there for a period of time. Would that be removed as anomaly?
That's a very good question. I think that's the reason why we don't have this ready yet.
But it's don't get me wrong, it's awesome and it's like really promising.
How big is the rolling? Like you mentioned that you're doing a rolling. So when we exceed 3 sigma of the previous data points, how big are those? Like how big is those set of previous data points?
So I think the window is just 14 days. In my mind, it's yet another parameter that you can tune, kind of. So depending on the data that you look at, might be different.
So that means that for things like the hourly or like the patterns that we want to detect that Andrew mentioned, we could say like for this saturation point, we want to not look back 14 days, but rather 12 hours. And then, yeah.
We could, yeah. I think sort of this is a bit troubling, I think. There's a lot of parameters that we can tune, right? We can add outliers and then maybe 10, 15 more parameters that we can tune for models. And I think we should strive to automate most of that if we can, but I think not all of that will be possible to automate.
And wherever possible, we should use the same parameters for all data, not have like per series, because that'll quickly kind of become unmaintainable if we have like different parameters for each one.
In my mind, the manually marked outliers that you demoed in the beginning, those are just for like incidents. Like we know this, we understand this, but we don't want it to affect our forecast anymore. And what we're talking about here is automatic things. So we don't need to look at things that we know are not important. Just how do we make sure that it's not too aggressive is what we're worried about, right?
Right. I think it's also a good example here if we have automatically detected outliers in this graph, right? And then we also have two parts that we specified manually, and the automatic outlier detection wouldn't have been able to detect these. So I like to think that sort of there is knowledge that we would still have to add in some cases to the model to arrive at good forecasts in the end.
Sort of so here's an interesting question. If we reverse time back to May 2023 on that graph, right? So right in the middle of all of that noise, like that, whatever that noise is there is something we would kind of want to pick up on, I think, in most cases, like that kind of like there's something in the signal there. With an anomaly detection, would it remove those particular that's sort of series of noise over there? Well, it might detect as noise, but might actually be like a signal that something's going wrong.
I think that would depend on how long it's ongoing. Like the first time you see it, we will probably mark it as an anomaly, and then
But that's probably quite a good set to kind of test with. If you take May rather than where we are now as the kind of and that's kind of the nice thing is we've got all this data going back, so we can kind of like on kind of previous situations.
And I think in the end, what is currently missing is, I think, what is something we should add is a measure of how good the quality is of that forecast. Sort of, Profit has a couple of diagnostics like mean squared error or something that tells you whether something was an actual improvement or not, right? Because right now we're mostly looking at things and saying, okay, it looks better. But so I think we should add this we should have a quality measure, and then Profit actually has a way to do forward chaining cross validation. So basically going over the data with testing validation sets and trying to figure out what
slightly complicated bit there is if we took action, right? Because it's not really fair on Profit if we took action and fixed a problem and then said, well, Profit didn't predict, that's you want to exclude the cases where we took action and that's how the correction was made, because obviously, can't deal with that case.
And this is also knowledge that I think we have to get from everyone is to know that there was we've done something about it, and this is why we're seeing the data change. So this has to somehow get into that model, basically.
This is awesome.
Cool. The other thing I wanted to mention is we've added support for Pi file system. So this is an abstraction for file systems in Python, and we can use it to store the cache in the GCS bucket, and this already works great. You basically have a multi-layer cache. So one is GCS bucket, and then the next one is local disk, and this is what we can already use, and we don't have to copy caches around anymore. And that makes it also a lot easier to work with that locally. So while you're forecasting these things, there's no need to talk to Thanos or something, even if you don't have the data locally. So what I would like to do next is setting up sort of long-term storage for that, so that we also capture those forecast results and the plots at longer term, and then eventually we may be able to have these. I don't know.
We have a group in the GitLab sandbox or whatever it's called. We have like a group project, and you can create buckets there that we can use for that.
Oh, okay. I have a personal project there in Sandbox. The
Yeah,
group one is different, right?
If you use the group one, then we all have access and we can all create keys and whatever. Like,
Sure, that makes sense.
something that you need to do to get access to that group, but maybe ping me on an issue and I'll try to help you figure it out. We'll reach out to the people that you, if you're not on the team yet, or whatever it needs to be.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. Is that also a long-term solution?
Yes, that's the long-term solution, because we were all using like our private buckets in there, and then that wasn't the point. So that's the long-term solution. It can stay there, and then that's just one of our buckets that we use. Another thing that we store there are images, like graph images that go onto the handbook is one thing. Yeah. So can go there.
Perfect.
Error budgets also get stored there.
Cool. Anything else about Tamland?
Can we get the change for the file system in like nowish already? Because I think that's like an awesome improvement. Can we do that first, or is that coupled to other things?
That's merged already, so it already works.
We're just not using it yet because we don't have a permanent storage place yet.
So I started to work on a project on the ops instance to run Tamland for GitLab specifically, because we want to split Tamland development project from the operational side of running it, right? And this is in a state where we grab a Docker image from Tamland. So this is new. We release a Docker image from Tamland, and it's already configured to use my private bucket to cache the data and also store the results. And so we just need to change it to the groups one, and then
that's awesome.
Be ready.
And then we could start running the Tamland run on GitLab.com that is now generating the images and creating the issues and so on. We could start running that with data from the buckets, from the bucket in.
Yeah, and in that area, there's still work to do. We currently still use the Jupyter notebook version of it, which is kind of unrelated still to the data that we just looked at. So there's a missing piece there, but eventually yes. All right, Dave, you have the next one.
Well, yeah, I snuck in ahead of you, Andrew. Sorry. So I'll be quick. It was just a brief update. We've started the POV with Loki, with Cloud Logs with Grafana. We started shipping logs on Tuesday morning. So we're gonna do a limited amount of logs from Pod, because for a proof of value where they're helping us trial stuff, they don't want to ingest a full 14 terabytes a day, oddly. So we're trying that out. We're going to build out some proof of concept dashboards and things, and try some stuff together in the cloud instances. And then, having realized as I started to talk about this whole build versus buy-in vendor stuff, we needed to take a step back. So I made a blueprint. I'm not sure I've got it perfectly in the right location. This is where blueprints used to be for infrastructure, but I can move markdown documents around. But it was trying to describe the like, hey, we need an observability platform. We're thinking about building, we're thinking about buying, here are the pros and cons and some of the designs of each. So I thought I'd just link that out in case you all are curious to see what we're thinking about. Liam, this is like the step back from what I wrote in that epic for you. Of like, you know, I'm trying to write stuff that's also consumable by like Mech and other people at this point. Of if I come to them with a Grafana contract, if we decide to go that route, I kind of need the background written for it. So but making sure I share that stuff with you guys. So but it's
That's
also a
really
lot of
helpful,
thought.
Dave.
Really nice, Dave.
It's a lot of thought about us as we've gotten into this trial, like basically thinking about in the future, like runways coming at us, dedicated's coming potentially at us, and cells is coming at us. We need tenants in different parts of the world. We need to provision that backend infrastructure, and we need to make it basically an API call on the other side for like, hey, I want to ship my logs and metrics. We're like, okay, yeah, here's your tenant ID and your creds. We want to make it simple, but we're thinking about like, how do we make that really easy to do? Calliope's already got a very basic Go service fronting the self-hosted Loki we've got going, but we're like, we need to think through a lot of this stuff. So it's just trying to share all that with you guys. That's all I got.
Like, two things that come to mind. It looks awesome, like, and I think it's a really important thing to start like writing down. But two things, like, I think the one thing is like for all except for dedicated, like I keep stressing this, and I think most people are on board, but it's worth stressing again. Like, we really should build like a single metrics kind of view of all the things that we can go to, right? Like, we don't want to have one for runway and like
no, and that's what this blueprint is about. Is like this. We need a. This is the blueprint. Like I was taking a step back and saying, "Hey, GitLab SaaS, all different forms of SaaS. We need an observability platform that there's one Grafana instance that you can go to." But on the back end, the client experience of like, we need to ship our logs and metrics is like call an API and we give you your creds. And then behind the scenes, we're plumbing the infrastructure either in Grafana Cloud or our own instances. But if we spin up a European cell, we need a European ingestion point and thinking about how we're going to architect that. That's what this blueprint's addressing. It's just
the last time I was on this call, we spoke about like that Terraform module being the interface between the teams. Oh wait, was that the runway call?
That was from the runway call.
yeah. And but we're talking about having like a, because the runway team was building that Terraform module to kind of interface with the logs data into the observability team. And we're saying, actually, it would make sense for the observability team to own that.
Correct.
And have that as the interface between the teams, right? So you like pull down that module, you stick in your creds, and then we don't care whether the backend is PubSub or like,
you shouldn't care. You basically should just be a customer.
It literally doesn't matter. Like whatever
call.
you like at that point, you're taking over. And so like with that, is that going to be in this, or is that too deep? Like I know you mentioned this is kind of focused on
well, I mean, it's meant to be kind of a fork in like blueprint. There's a top level problem summary for like the Mech org level, and then it breaks into two separate design docs of, if we self-host, what's the design for that? If we work with Grafana Cloud, what's the design for that? Because we need to think through that, and that's where we're documenting how we do that. I would
suggest, like, for both of them, we still want to have, like, whether it's behind that Terraform, and I know I'm going back into the weeds here, like, but this is demo call, so we're allowed in the weeds. But like, I would suggest, like, even if like we self-host some things, or use cloud services for other things, it's almost like that's an implementation detail behind the
runway shouldn't care.
It's like we use a module, and if today it's using Grafana Cloud, and tomorrow it's using like a self-hosted Elasticsearch cluster, that's kind of like a change behind.
Either way, we're still just giving you an API key that ingests your metrics and logs, and we put it in the backend. That's what we're trying to get to, and that's some of what this is describing.
Can I make another? Just sorry, while we
I'm happy to take the input.
Can I have, instead of a key, can I have a path to Vault? I don't want a key. I want a path into Vault.
Yes, if you connect Runway to Vault, we'd be happy to do that.
Well, So because what we want to pass around is references to secrets in a secret manager. Because otherwise we put that responsibility on people and they do bad.
I think I was wording that wrong. Like my input that I'd had in discussions with Alan is basically we don't want a human involved in the design. of what we're trying to do.
So on dedicated, we're doing a similar thing where Switchboard needs to give the dedicated customer their GitLab root password, which is in the Switchboard inside the tenant account, right? And so, like, you know, the one thing you can do is kind of send the password back through like mechanisms. We don't want to do that. So what we do is we actually pass the ARN for the secrets manager secret back to Switchboard and say, you've been given permission, you know, your principal
read this particular thing.
To read this particular thing, you can read it from there. But we
Okay,
don't.
so Vault is the preferred thing internally for things that we're thinking.
Yeah. For dedicated, it's kind of like we don't have vaults in there, so you know we're just using what AWS gives us. But for everything else, it should be Vault.
No, and that's why I asterisked dedicated. Like it's more that I see like Runway and Cells as like future customers that are going to be different than what we currently do for metrics and logs for .com. And how do we tenant that out? And how do we make that easy? That's what we're thinking about.
Awesome.
And yeah, it shouldn't matter if it's Elastic, Grafana Cloud Logs, or self-hosted Loki. It's going to be one of those three. But yeah, that's an implementation detail Runway, for example, shouldn't have to care about. Where like, this is the place you go get your secret, and this is the endpoint included in that, and ship to that endpoint, and we'll make sure it gets plumbed to the right place. So
yeah, awesome.
But yeah, just sharing the update on kind of where we are. So now we can convert to the Runway meeting.
All right, so
I actually got a job. Sorry, I got a job. I got to go to a call with Grafana.
So I just wanted to, I have the next point. I wanted to quickly mention the work that we have been doing in Runway and the direction that we're taking stuff in. So let me share my screen real quick. So yeah, we merged this change where we are trying to consolidate all of the Runway operations into Runway CTL. So our initial implementation of Runway was one where we had a lot of the logic for Runway in the YAML files, in the GitLab CI YAML files that we are asking service maintainers to include in their projects. And so we're moving a lot of the variable setup and a lot of the logic from that into Runway CTL, which is a command line, the command line interface for Runway. And the idea is that now on the Runway task, we just call that application, and that's also what you can call locally. So like here I have a project, the model evaluator, and I'll just show up real quick that you can basically do the same command that it's being done on the CI task, and have locally a Terraform plan, and or a Terraform apply. You can also apply directly from here. And the idea is that we want to enable developers to quickly test what they are doing in Runway and emulate, or not even emulate, this will go to the actual Runway runtime, so that they can test their changes real quick. This is still a vision for two reasons. One, you need a lot of setup. Like for this to actually work, you need all these environment variables, and you need to set them on completely. You need to have, we list all the steps here. You need to have a Docker daemon running locally, and it needs to be authenticated with the GCR registry, with the GitLab registry. And then the other problem that we have at the moment is that this is actually not available to developers at the moment. All of the things that this is doing in the back is only working because I'm sending to my SRE GCP credentials. This will not work for a developer. So one thing that we're considering, one proposal that I'll link in the agenda, is switching Runway to a control plane, where, sorry, let me put this silence. One thing that we're considering is moving all of the operations that runway has to execute in Terraform to a control plane, because this is currently running on my laptop. Moving that to a control plane, and then you just have to give developers access to that control plane, and all the logic happens there. But yeah, this is what we are aiming for, just having a command line interface where people can test from their local setup to the Cloud Run service.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Alejandro, one of the things that was discussed in the runway call this morning was for obviously one of the things that people are going to want to do is kind of develop locally, but like locally, like no one wants to kind of be testing things on their machine and then having to deploy into the cloud, and they don't have debugging and all of those things. We're talking about like having a runway kind of subcommand, which could kind of take your manifest and generate a Docker Compose or whatever, choose your favorite poison here, but like, you know, a Docker Compose like file that it can generate locally, and then you can just like Docker Compose up that and actually test your environment locally. I don't know if there was an issue opened about that, but it was like, it's kind of similar to what you're talking about there with sort of developer experience.
Yeah, we have discussed that. I think we have not done that so far, just because that will be a parallel logic. So so far,
you can't kind of, you know, it's kind of a different definition, but
yeah,
I think it will really help with like developer experience and adoption over the medium term, right?
Yeah. One thing that I wonder there is for a developer's point of view, what would be the value of doing that instead of just doing your usual development, so like just spinning poetry run code suggestions?
So it's not really, it's kind of for more like when we start adding other things in, right? So like if we have an option to say we want a Postgres database, or we want a Redis instance that's, you know, kind of baked in, and obviously we'll give people kind of like limited controls into what you know, we can't have someone setting up MongoDB, and but there'll be like people are going to need to. But yeah, and yeah, that's a good thing as well, actually, is that. But yeah, like right now, because it's so simple, it's just a container, like exactly like you say. The best way to run it is just with poetry or whatever you use. But at some point in the future, when we start having like sidecars or services or whatever, then it'll make sense to be able to run at least those services in Docker Compose.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, that makes sense.
But that's awesome. It's cool. It's cool that it's all being baked into the app.
Yeah, cool. That's all I had to show. So I think that's everything we have on the agenda.
Bye all.
Thanks everyone.
Bye.